Japan's super cheap corn snacks apologize for a second ever price increase.
I saw this, man. It was. They should commit seppuku, dude. Like,
Which
it was
place?
like,
How dare they?
What brand?
This is called Umaibo. Nailed it. It's this guy.
you know the little.
Looks like a
Doraemon
cigar.
ones?
It's a corn snack.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And they just increased the
Fucking
prices
bomb, dude.
the second time
Is it?
for 45 years.
That's tight.
45.
But they're like really sorry about it.
Did you say how much it was?
It is 10 yen. Nailed it. And yeah. So
It's
that
like 2 cents.
no, it was 10 yen back in 1979.
Yeah.
Now it's double that.
They did like a 2-cent increase.
Wow. That's funny.
Apologize to.
It's
good. Very Japanese.
They actually got one of the executives to cut himself open during the ceremony.
Really?
Yeah, because every single time they do a price increase, they have to give one of their own.
Yeah. That makes
Sacrifice.
Sense. That makes sense.
And right now, they've been doing that a lot in Japan from the economy, dude. Like, that's why there's a population decrease. They don't tell you about that.
What's happening in the economy right now in Japan?
Oh, dude, their yen is fucked.
Really?
It's like dropped like 70% or some shit. That's why everybody is going there. Like, everything's cheap. So cheap.
Dude, they'll give you a house and like you can get a chick and stuff.
Yeah.
Cause they're basically like, hey, come.
A live-in wife. Yeah.
No, cause they're like, hey, come here and like breed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's like a
It's a
breeder
program.
visa
Yeah,
or some
breeder
shit.
program,
Yeah, it's
dude.
crazy.
What?
They're desperate.
Domestic flights right now from city to city are free.
What?
Whoa.
And they're going like crazy on the advertising. They're like, we'll give you if you buy a house or whatever like that. It's like you have a right to one kung guzzling slut.
In Japanese. Just one?
Just one.
Just one.
Don't be all greedy.
So cheap.
Is the birthday problem like just men don't want to have babies or women don't either?
It's both.
It's all the above.
So then if you
so
move
it's
there,
the
it's
same-
probably not going to make a difference.
It's
right?
the same issue that we're kind of seeing across the board with Gen Z and millennials.
Yeah.
We're having kids much later, but it's like times 10 out there because, you know, like Asian work culture sucks. And then the gender role thing hasn't really changed yet, where women, you still work, but then you still do all the house chores.
So are people's happy? Like, you know when they do those happiness level surveys? Japan's is pretty low right now.
They're the highest suicide rate in the world.
Yeah.
In the world.
They compete with Korea. So they're always going, no, we're more suicidal. No, we are.
Wow.
But I think Korea and Japan has very similar work cultures, and then the success of the countries are similar too. Like right after destruction
war,
after the war,
yeah.
like, and then Japan was also involved in Korea's like rebuilding with the U.S. because the U.S., Japan, and Korea are all kind of in cahoots, right? And then they modeled themselves based off the U.S. government. And they rebuilt as quick as possible. In less than like 30 years, they became an economic power. So they were workaholics like crazy. So there's a whole generation of like this no family unit. And so you have parents, workaholics, kids, after school, you have your like prep school shit for college. And no one actually grew up with a family. You know what I mean? So like, only my grandma's generation remembers what it's like to have family. So my parents' generation and all that, like they're just like,
So they're just like soulless robots.
yeah. And then so now the next generation is like, why would I want a family? I never had a family. My dad's always at work. I never met the guy. And then like, I'm sure Korea's the same too, where it's like, if you it's nothing but materialism. So you just work your ass off, and then there's no real like people aren't marrying for love. And I'm not saying everyone's doing this. It's just like so common that it's like, why try? You have to do so much. And if you're a guy and you're single and you're doing like well for yourself, you're gonna have to give all of that up, like money wise, right? And they're like, for what? I'm not even
give it up. Give it up. How?
So like traditionally, the way that it works is guys go out, earn bread, and then you kick up that money to your wife. Your wife stays at home, manages the finances. That's why one of the biggest stock
Why
trading
stays at home?
groups.
You like that shit?
Well, no, they work now too. So dual income has to happen. Dual income has to happen now because it's impossible. But that's traditional, right?
Yeah.
So a man, all he's supposed to do is just fucking work his ass off, and he just brings the money home. the wife takes care of the bills, organizes the funds, and that's why one of the biggest stock trading groups in Japan are housewives.
Wow. My grandma did that shit, dude. My grandpa was a Marine, right? And he was just too busy doing stuff on base and stuff. So my grandma balanced the checkbook, took care of all the finances. Like, that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
She was born during the Great Depression. And this bitch is doing that stuff.
But now you can't trust no bitch with money too.
Nah, you can't.
Where'd you get that new purse?
Yeah.
You know what's crazy with Gen Z, like this next generation? There's this huge like conservative slash going back to traditional gender roles type movement.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
That shit ain't happening in Asia.
Yeah, they'll interview these little like 13, 14-year-old kids, and they're talking about like, oh yeah, I want to be the one that works, and the other one's like, I want to be the homemaker at home. And it's like crazy to see like the whole thing kind of like swing back around where they like maybe they're witnessing the you have to work and take care of the kids thing and like trying to fight for equality in the workplace. They see that doesn't really work. So there's like this whole new movement with like super young kids where they almost sound like boomers. And it's like, oh shit.
You know what's interesting? Gen X has a higher rate of staying together as a family than boomers. Gen X, I think, right now is in their 50s, and they're the fathers and mothers of the Gen Zs. So like, they're more like, the philosophy is like less work, more family, spending time with kids, all this stuff. Boomers were like the parents of millennials, right? And so we grew up with a lot of like divorce and also like workaholic parents. They were keeping up with the Jones and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, I think that's pretty interesting, right? Because then we're seeing this new generation that's like more like, yeah, if I do have a family, I want to be more traditional about it. And then the ones that don't want to have a family, they're complete. It's like two complete polar things.
But wouldn't that time frame coincide with like the state of like even like economy, for example? The idea of like how much the American dream is so much more difficult to attain because house prices don't reflect wages and stuff, which is why people got forced into having a dual income for the household, which makes it harder for women to want to have children or raise a kid in general for the family. Like, you know what I mean? Like
No, 100%. Yeah.
So we would have to solve that problem where that lovable life in the American dream for us is attainable. I know we're talking about Japan, but
I think it's the easiest solve this problem, but people don't want to do it.
Well, I mean, I think
you go like this. You go like this, right? Pull it out of California. Go to literally any of the 49 states. Bam! One person can stay home and the other person can go to work.
But I do think, regardless if it's California or Japan or whatever, right? Like, if you think about females that are working and earning their own money and being independent and stuff like that, a lot of them don't want to get married and lose all of that freedom. Like, if you think about like a more traditional society like Japan, is like you're both male and females. Once you get together, you're both like, now your freedom is gone. So you staying youthful, doing whatever the fuck you want, consuming and just playing all day, life is much easier. But now you have a duty to the family, because you know the Asian thing is like, now it's not about you. Once you have this different role, everything is about the kid, or everything is about, there's like no sense of self anymore. And I think that's a little bit different. But you see a sign of that in the US too, where a lot of people are like, well, I don't know, like, do I really want to like buy more shit and have more kids? And then they see it as a burden.
I think they just need to see, like, balance their short-term and long-term goals, and then seeing the ROI of these things, because a lot of them, it's like, I like the freedom of being able to fuck my sex robot in the closet.
Yeah.
And it's like, or getting into an actual fulfilling relationship and going, wait, this type of codependency that we have is actually way better than the amounts of masturbation I've been doing and having the freedom of, you know.
sex robot doesn't talk back.
But you can include the sex robot. You can have a great relationship, include the sex robot.
Yeah. Side chick.
Threesome.
Like that shit.
Threesome robot.
Winning.
Yeah.
Best of both worlds, I think.
So the replacement rate in society is 2. meaning if there's man and woman, then you need to have 2 kids per couple for society to sustain. 2.1 if you want to grow. United States, something like 1.6, meaning United States is going backwards. Japan and Korea are like 0.7.
Wow.
Yeah. China's hurting too.
Significantly lower than the 2 necessary for. If you look at it, it's like, okay, what is causing that to be 0.7 when you have to be at 2? That's such a big gap. And if you look, the lowest birth rates in the world are the countries that have most technology and consumerism. If you look at Africa, their birth rate is like 4.
Wow.
They have no technology, no consumerism, and they are mating like rabbits. They have kids popping out everywhere. The ones that have the most technology, which is Japan, Korea, they are not having kids. And I think the technology is making people want things that they don't actually need. That you focus on things, because the most common answer you get when you ask a young couple, why aren't you having kids? They say, well, it's too expensive. But then you go to the bar and the club and it's packed. So it's not actually a money issue, because it's a priorities issue. They want to have all these things in life that society says you're supposed to have, but I don't want to sacrifice that for my kids.
That's me.
I want all of that,
That's me.
right? The reality is that you have to give up certain things in your life and focus on your kids. Kids aren't actually that expensive.
But they're
You have children.
annoying.
You
They're
have
loud.
kids. They don't cost as much
They have
as
so
you
many
think.
questions.
My
A
wife's
bottle at the club is significantly more expensive than your kids are.
Wouldn't okay? So
$100 sushi is way more expensive than your kid. But we'll spend all that, and you don't want to spend it on your children.
It's a time cost.
But I believe that the people that don't want kids didn't grow up in a good family. So it's like, why would you want something that was horrible for you? You know, like, and then if everything around you, like, let's say your whole, you know, it's like you see failed relationship after your relatives are always fighting. They're in miserable marriages, and you had a horrible childhood. Your cousins had it's like, why would you want to continue that? It's safer being alone in your house, right?
For me, as the guy who doesn't want kids right now,
Have kids.
you think?
Of course.
Yeah, but
it's the best thing ever.
My relationship is so sick, and the biggest thing I always hear from people that messes up marriages and everything. We had a kid and everything got like, you turn the table upside down basically. That's the biggest thing. Is my relationship is so good.
Communication is though, it's gonna make your relationship even stronger.
You guys probably should have a kid.
What I notice is people that say that, it's because they already have a hard time communicating with their partner. So when you throw like something in the mix, it's like another hurdle. But you guys are like so strong.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
100% have children.
You really
then.
think?
Of course. I can't believe you're like not.
Have a kid.
It's literally the best thing in
Leave it
life,
in.
having children.
Just leave it
The
in.
best thing you can
Even
do.
like, what's the logic of low income households around, like, let's say just California, because that's what I know. Why do they have so many kids if they had bad childhoods and they have lower resources than a lot of other families?
I think it's impulsiveness. They're just horny. And they're not planning and having kids. They're just
They're not
like,
planning, yeah.
I'm just busting nuts because
Busting 'em,
it feels great.
Low income people don't have as much access to all the consumerism in life. They don't have to sacrifice $100 sushi because they don't eat $100 sushi.
They eat grocery store sushi.
Much cheaper.
Big brain.
You know, having kids is the best thing. Highly recommend it. I think it's the best thing you could possibly do. And it'll change the way you see the world, how you perceive the world, what's important to you, what's not important to you, and the way you live your life. And I think the idea that we've normalized divorce amongst families is actually a big problem. Yeah. We throw that stat around. 50% of all marriages end up in divorce. It's almost like you say that to make it okay to get a divorce.
Coping.
But then remember that one stat that you found that said that, like, also people that get divorced tend to get divorced
So
again.
out of that 50%,
Some of those are the same guy.
So where it's kind of like gray area is it might be closer to 20 because the majority of that group, it's like their second or third failed marriage. So they're repetitive offenders in that divorce group. But still,
so
it's still
That made
it's
a lot
still
of sense.
high
'Cause I was
number.
like, oh yeah, the people
Yeah.
that I know have.
But
gotten
even if
divorced.
it's 20-ish% to me, that's still a fucking high number.
Yeah, it's still high.
Because it used to be like nothing.
But you know, sometimes people get into marriages and then they divorce and then they get 50% of the assets.
That's cool.
It's pretty sick.
I'm a fan of that.
There's only one time in life that a man, maybe one, that a man stands in front of God, his friends, his family, everyone he knows, and says, I vow to do something. It's actually the only time you do it. any other time in life, like back in the day, you say, I'm going to vow to do something, and that family wronged me, and you dedicate your life to right that wrong.
Yeah.
When you get married, you say, I vow to take care of this woman through sickness and health, and you vow in front of the entire world, in front of your God, in front of your family, and so easily we just say, well, we don't really love each other anymore, so we're gonna get divorced.
We grew apart.
Throw the towel in.
But the reality is, like, one day you might love your wife, one day you might love her less, 1 year you may love your wife, 1 year later you might love her less. It's a cycle. The idea that love is the only thing that matters in a relationship is actually wrong. Because you fall in and out of love all the time. The most important thing is you've made a commitment and you've vowed that you're going to take care of her. You should stick to that. And if you keep that as important, then having kids becomes less risky. It's because people live so much in their feelings of, we fell apart. Well, if you gave it time, you might actually get back together.
I would also argue that for the people that had bad childhoods, came from broken families, who stay away from kids, I actually think the best way to conquer like that skateboard fear isn't to stay away from the skateboard, but to get back on the skateboard and nail the ollie. So to have your own kids, and then to fix that family and relationship that you ever had is probably the most healing thing you could ever do for yourself.
You have to break the cycle eventually.
Yeah.
But if we bring him back to like Asia though, I think it's very transactional there. So like marriage,
For purpose.
it's never had a history of doing it for love.
Okay.
So
Family building?
the duty seems like, why am I committing to this? Why? And people in the past never questioned it. And now this generation is actually questioning the purpose of why. Before they were a bunch of lemmings that just, there's a lot of doing things because you're told to do in Japan, right? So I think
Here too.
I think it's more so in a way that Americans won't even understand.
Well,
in
there's
Japan.
a romanticized thing when we're all growing up where like we watch Disney movies and stuff like that, and it's like we gotta get married, we gotta have kids, like that's like
Yeah, that's propaganda in its own, right?
Yeah.
But at least in the West, there's a belief of this pure, authentic two people coming together because they love each other, and then committing. Like that's a new concept in Asia. It's a completely new concept, right?
Got it.
I'm saying because up until my grandma's generation, like it's all arranged,
Right.
and you did it because you just did it, and your family told you to do it.
And it's pro-growth the same way that the propaganda is pro-growth.
Yeah. And it bring families together. It's not because you love this woman, but because it's a great fit for the family. Because maybe they're textile people and you're a fucking retail store for clothes.
Right.
And then you build that family. You actually, as a man, find love outside. And it was acceptable to go and fucking fall in love with a geisha or whatever. If you had the money for it, it was like, okay, you could go and have a mistress. And that's who your lover is. But this is your wife. You just make a kid with her.
Damn, cold.
So that's the mentality, right? So then women are like, why the fuck would I want to do this? And then it makes a lot of sense to me, at least. Because, at least out here, it's like, there's a hope of like, oh, I get to find my true love, and then we get to build a family, and we could have kids, and we can like build this thing. But out there's like no real concept of that. Like, it's just a weird kind of different world where, I don't think there's a actual, what do you call it? Like, it's one of those lost in translation things where there's no similar example that you can say this is what it is, apples to apples.
Do they say vows during weddings out there, or is it?
Well, they
just
have Western style weddings.
Or is it just more responsibility quotes like "I will take care of you. You will have food. You will. I will not bring the geisha home."
They have Christian style weddings, but it's like aesthetic. You know what I mean? It's an atheist country. Like they do Shintoism and they do Buddhism, but it's not like, you know what I mean? It's not in the same. It's like
Honestly, religion does help birth rate quite a bit.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
But it's honestly fucked up that these guys raise their prices on their snacks.
Honestly.
10 yen?
That's where we started home.
That's crazy. Oh yeah, I thought we were doing a fucking
I
off the
turned it
record.
into OTR because